Hello there, and welcome to Back When, a sleepy glimpse into a bygone era, where the pace was slower, the memories were vivid, and the times were simpler. Tonight, we're going to drift together into a time that feels close, and yet so far away. A time before streaming, before skipping intros, before algorithms chose your next watch for you. We're going back to when a small plastic cassette changed entertainment forever. The VHS tape wasn't just a format, it was a revolution. But why did it win the fierce battle against Betamax? And how did it become the silent hero of countless family movie nights? We'll explore the quiet triumph of VHS, the way it tucked itself into our homes and hearts. From the rise of video rental stores to the comforting ritual of rewinding, this is the story of how a simple technology rewrote how we experience family, friends, and entertainment. Chapter 1. The birth of a quiet revolution. Remember when movies were something you only watched in theaters? JVC changed that in 1976. With a simple plastic shell and a magnetic tape. Before VHS, people had tried bringing movies home with formats like U-matic and Cartravision. But these were bulky, expensive, or too complicated for most families. The VHS cassette, with its 12.7mm wide tape, wound neatly between two spools, fit perfectly in your hand. It felt solid but light, like something meant to be handled often. Early home video systems required special training to operate, and cost as much as a small car. VHS changed that. The engineers at JVC made a decision that would shape entertainment for decades. They designed for simplicity over technical perfection. Their first recorder, the HR3300, had large buttons even a child could understand. The cassette itself slid smoothly into the machine with a satisfying click anyone could master. What really made VHS stand out was time. That first model could record for 2 full hours, enough for most movies without changing tapes. For families used to rigid TV schedules, this felt like magic. Now you could record the late movie while you slept, or save a special program to watch together on Sunday afternoon. The tape heads wore down over time, making the picture slightly fuzzy. But no one seemed to mind when they could pause live TV to answer the phone, or rewind to watch a favorite scene again. Other companies had tried to solve the home video problem with complex solutions. Sony's Betamax offered sharper pictures from the start, but it couldn't match VHS's recording time. RCA attempted disc-based systems that skipped when you walked too heavily. Philips made machines that only worked with their own expensive tapes. VHS succeeded because it understood homes weren't television studios. They were places where kids spilled juice and adults wanted to relax after work. The engineers at JVC focused on making something that would disappear into daily life. They chose plastic gears that were quiet even when rewinding at night. They designed tapes that could survive being left in a hot car or stuffed under a couch cushion. The rounded corners showed they expected people to handle them often. Little details like the clear plastic window revealing the tape's position, or the satisfying snap of the safety tab when recording. These made the format feel personal in a way earlier systems hadn't. Movie studios initially feared home recording would destroy their business, but families saw something different. For the first time, you could curate your own collection. Birthday parties, favorite sitcoms, championship games, all could be saved in identical black cases lined up on a shelf. Children memorized the order of their favorite tapes by the colored spines. Parents developed rituals around who got to choose the weekend's movie from their small but growing library. That simplicity hid serious engineering. The Heckel scan system recorded video diagonally across the tape to save space. Audio tracks ran along the edges and straight lines for stability. Even the cassette's orientation, dropping in label side up, prevented mistakes common with earlier formats. JVC's team tested prototypes by having secretaries and janitors try them, not just technicians. They knew adoption depended on people who didn't read instruction manuals. By the late 1970s, something unexpected happened. Families didn't just watch movies on VHS, they made their own. The first home videos captured christenings, school plays, and backyard barbecues. Grandparents received tapes of grandchildren's first steps in the mail. While earlier systems had focused narrowly on pre-recorded content, VHS became a fixture at graduations and weddings. The tapes themselves developed personalities. Some hissed more than others, certain brands lasted longer, and everyone learned to clean their heads occasionally with a special cassette. As prices dropped below $1,000, then $500, VHS recorders appeared in classrooms and small businesses. Teachers taped documentaries to show during rainy recesses. Office workers recorded training sessions to review later. Department stores set up demo units, showing the same Disney clips on an endless loop. The format quietly spread because it solved real problems. How to share memories, revisit important moments, or simply not miss your show when dinner ran late. Beneath this everyday success, tensions were building. Sony's Betamax still held advantages in picture quality. Movie studios remained wary of home copying, and competitors scrambled to offer their own formats before VHS became unstoppable. But in living rooms across the world, families were already making space for those black plastic cases, stacking them near the TV, labeling them with masking tape, treating them like treasures. The revolution wasn't flashy. It came softly, with a whisper of turning spools and the glow of a red Reese light in the dark. What none of the engineers anticipated was how these tapes would become time capsules. That recording of the '78 World Series or the soap opera your grandmother saved would outlast the machines that played them. Children grew up recognizing the warble in a worn tape's audio as surely as their own voices. The format's imperfections, the way colors blurred slightly or tracking lines appeared, became part of the experience, like scratches on a favorite table. By the time other companies realized VHS was winning, something important had already happened. People stopped thinking about the technology. They cared about the moments it preserved. A generation learned to associate the sound of a tape rewinding with bedtime stories or Saturday mornings. The cassette's simple design, no fragile parts exposed, no complicated threading, meant even toddlers could hand them to parents to pop into the machine. In an era of complex gadgets, VHS succeeded by being ordinary enough to forget about, yet reliable enough to trust with memories. Those early JVC engineers prioritized something deeper than specifications. They built for the way people actually lived, in homes where things got spilled, where children played, where no one wanted to fiddle with dials after a long day. The quiet whir of a well-made VHS cassette loading perfectly every time wasn't an accident. It was the sound of technology finally understanding family life. Chapter 2: David vs. Goliath, the Betamax War. The Betamax War wasn't just about technology. It was about how we'd experienced movies at home for decades to come. Sony introduced Betamax in 1975, a year before VHS, with noticeably better picture quality. Their tapes showed sharper images with 250 lines of resolution, compared to VHS's 240. Left double right curly brace video files. The this difference mattered. But to most families, those extra lines meant little when they couldn't record an entire football game or the late movie without changing tapes. Sony kept tight control over Betamax production, only allowing a handful of manufacturers to make the machines. This meant prices stayed high, around $1,300 in 1976, nearly twice what early VHS models cost. JVC took the opposite approach, freely licensing VHS technology to companies like Panasonic and Zenith. Soon, department stores featured walls of competing VHS models at various price points, all playing the same tapes. Betamax sat alone on shelves, like luxury items most couldn't justify. Early adopters became fierce partisans. Beta supporters pointed to cleaner audio and that slight edge in picture clarity. They'd invite friends over specifically to show off how crisp their recordings of masterpiece theater looked. VHS owners countered by recording entire double features without interruption, or taping back-to-back episodes of their favorite shows. The debates played out in electronics store aisles and over backyard fences, often louder than the actual quality differences justified. Movie studios initially saw both formats as threats. Universal Pictures and Disney sued Sony in 1976, claiming home recording violated copyright, a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. While the legal battle raged, JVC smartly focused on selling blank tapes. Their marketing showed families recording grandmother's birthday or Little League games, not Hollywood films. This positioning made VHS seem harmless, compared to Betamax's emphasis on movies. The turning point came when Matsushita, JVC's parent company, convinced major Hollywood studios to release movies on VHS first. By 1980, new films appeared on VHS weeks before Beta. Rental stores noticed customers preferred the format with more selection. Blockbuster's decision in the mid-1980s to stock only VHS cemented this shift. Their reasoning was practical. More movies fit on VHS shelves, since the cassettes were slightly larger but held more content per tape. Engineering differences told the real story. Betamax's tape ran at 1.5 inches per second, compared to VHS's 1.3 inches, eating up tape faster. While this gave marginally better quality, it limited early machines to just 1 hour of recording. JVC engineers had prioritized capacity, squeezing 2 hours onto similar length tapes simply by moving the heads differently. Later Beta models extended recording times, but by then the public associated VHS with convenience. Small details tilted the balance. VHS machines rewound tapes nearly twice as fast as Betamax, 6 minutes versus 11 for a full 2-hour tape. The VHS cassette's flip-top lid protected the tape better than Beta's sliding door, which sometimes jammed when dust got inside. Even the VHS tracking control, though occasionally finicky, proved more intuitive than Beta's complex alignment adjustments hidden in menus. As prices dropped through the early 1980s, VHS dominated the middle market. Wealthy audiophiles still bought Betamax, and cheap knockoff formats like Video 2000 tried competing, but VHS became the default. By 1984, 90% of video rental stores stocked primarily VHS. Public libraries switched their educational film collections from bulky 16mm reels to VHS. Even Sony dealers quietly started carrying VHS machines alongside Beta to stay in business. The quality gap narrowed just as VHS overtook Beta. JVC introduced HQ high-quality circuitry in 1985, boosting VHS resolution noticeably. Stereo sound arrived on VHS the same year as Beta, eliminating another advantage. Sony loyalists maintained Beta's superiority for professional use, but home users couldn't tell much difference anymore. especially through rabbit-ear TV antennas. Storage became another VHS strength. EP mode let 6 hours fit on one tape, perfect for recording whole sports tournaments or taping shows while on vacation. Betamax's longest mode topped out at 5 hours with noticeably worse quality. For families building home video libraries, those extra hours mattered more than slightly crisper images during playback. Cultural momentum took over. When friends shared home videos, they used VHS. School AV carts held VHS players. Hotel movie systems converted to VHS. This created a feedback loop. More demand led to more manufacturing, which lowered prices further. By 1987, decent VHS machines sold for under $200, while Betamax struggled to break $500. Sony officially conceded in 1988, introducing their own VHS line, while quietly maintaining Beta for broadcast clients. The strangest twist: Beta's better technology might have killed it. Sony engineers refused to compromise their standards to extend recording times as quickly as JVC did. Their tapes used higher-grade oxide coatings that cost more, but lasted longer. Something few consumers noticed, since most home recordings got erased and reused within months anyway. In chasing perfection, Sony missed what people actually needed. JVC understood something Sony didn't. Home video wasn't about fidelity, it was about freedom. The ability to pause live TV during dinner, to watch movies when you wanted, to tape operas that aired past bedtime. These conveniences mattered more than laboratory measurements ever could. VHS succeeded by being good enough at many things rather than excellent at a few. Looking back, the Betamax name itself became a cautionary term. The next Betamax still describes superior technology that loses to something more practical. Yet without this competition, VHS might not have improved as quickly. The two formats pushed each other through the 1980s, creating faster rewinding, better tracking, and longer tapes. By the time DVDs arrived, home video technology had matured precisely because of this early rivalry. In basements and attics today, forgotten beta tapes gather dust in far greater proportion than their actual market share ever was. A testament to how thoroughly VHS won the format war. Most people interacted with beta only through occasional superior recordings passed along by that one friend still loyal to Sony. Even those pristine tapes eventually got dubbed onto VHS for convenience. The slightly softer image, accepted as fair trade for compatibility with everyone else's machines. The lessons went beyond video. Future format wars, HD DVD versus Blu-ray, AAC versus MP3, all reflected the same truth first proven here. Standards win through accessibility, not superiority. Consumers ultimately care less about technical benchmarks than about what works easily with what everyone else has. Just as families chose VHS to share videos with neighbors, later technologies would succeed or fail based on how well they facilitated sharing, rather than how perfectly they reproduced content. Yet, something got lost when physical tapes disappeared. That satisfying weight of a cassette, the deliberate choice required when slotting one into the machine, even the occasional tracking adjustments, these created engagement beyond clicking icons. The format wars winner changed entertainment forever, but along with Betamax's demise went certain tactile pleasures later technologies never replicated. Both formats, in their way, represented types of attention we rarely give our entertainment today. Chapter 3: Friday Night Rituals. The Rental Revolution. The video store became a ritual space in the 1980s, a place where families made decisions together. You'd walk in and immediately face rows of shelves organized by genre, each tape spine showing the title in bold letters against colored backgrounds. The new releases sat up front in their special carousel, plastic cases still shiny from recent shipments. Each Friday evening brought the same scene: parents checking watches while children dashed to the kids section, teenagers lingering near the horror movies they couldn't rent without parental permission. The clerk behind the counter knew regulars by name, sliding membership cards across the Formica countertop with practiced ease. Movie studios fought this system at first. They priced early VHS tapes at $80, $100 each, assuming only collectors would buy them outright. When entrepreneurs like George Atkinson in Los Angeles started renting these expensive tapes for $10 a night in 1977, studios sued. They argued rentals would kill ticket sales, not understanding people still wanted theater experiences. They just also wanted options for home viewing. The legal battles lasted years before studios realized rental stores actually boosted interest in their films. Someone who rented E.T. might later buy tickets to see Close Encounters in theaters. By 1983, rental stores had developed their own economics. Each store needed multiple copies of hit films, often 10 to 15 of the newest releases, while keeping niche titles in single copies. Stores paid around $50 per tape wholesale, recouping that after 5 rentals. Late fees became essential, typically $1 per day overdue, though customers learned to blame "the machine ate my quarter" when returning tapes past due. Stores used this income to refresh their collections monthly, pulping worn tapes after about 30 rentals when the picture degraded too much. The physical space of video stores encouraged discovery. Alphabetical organization meant browsing past unexpected titles. The Goonies shelved near Chic. Gone with the Wind. Handwritten index cards taped beneath certain shelves read, "Staff pick," with brief recommendations. Some stores grouped films by director or theme, creating accidental double-feature ideas. The carpet absorbed years of spilled popcorn smells, mixing with the plastic tang of new case wrappers. You judged tapes by their box art since no previews existed. A thrilling painted cover could convince you to gamble on an unknown movie. Rental patterns followed predictable rhythms. Fridays between 5 to 7 p.m. saw the longest lines as workers stopped by after paychecks cleared. Weekday afternoons brought retirees renting classic films, while kids traded bike rides for Saturday morning cartoon tapes. Stores learned to stock extra copies of major releases. 3 months after Batman hit theaters in 1989, stores still couldn't keep it on shelves. Some locations instituted 24-hour returns to meet demand, with drop boxes for overnight tape returns bolted beside their front doors. Film studios eventually embraced rentals through sell-through pricing. By the late 1980s, they released some titles immediately at $20 to $30 price points, designed for home ownership rather than rental. Disney led this shift, realizing families would buy certain animated classics to rewatch endlessly. Still, rental remained the primary access method. Surveys showed the average VHS tape got rented 60 times before being sold used for $5 in bargain bins. The late fee system created its own culture. Stores printed overdue notices on bright green paper that stood out in mail piles. Parents delegated tape returns to children, leading to frantic bike rides to beat the next day's charges. Clever customers learned to rewind tapes while waiting in line to avoid the $1 rewind fee some stores charged. The most organized families kept rental calendars on kitchen refrigerators, coordinating who returned which tape when. Independent stores often waived first-time late fees, while chains like Blockbuster enforced them strictly. Children experienced rentals differently. The kids section usually occupied a carpeted corner, with small chairs. its lower shelves holding worn copies of animated films and live-action adventures. Parents could leave them browsing safely while reviewing adult selections. Kids memorized which tapes included previews for upcoming movies, sometimes re-watching those more than the feature films. Birthday parties often included group trips to pick that weekend's movie, with heated debates over choices settled by parents mediating. Many children's first independent purchases involved pocket change spent on used cartoons from the $1 bin. Technology shaped rental behaviors too. Early VHS machines had counters displaying tape position, letting viewers mark favorite scenes with notebook scribbles like "Counter 245, best part." Stores offered rewind or pay policies, because worn tapes jammed in machines when not fully rewound. Some locations installed automatic rewinders behind counters, hulking machines that rapidly spun multiple tapes at once, with audible whines. Customers learned to check tapes before renting, holding them to light to inspect for winkles or damage that might freeze their home players. Independent stores cultivated personalities that chains later standardized away. Some specialized in foreign films or obscure genres, their owners acting as curators who ordered unusual titles. Others focused on family-friendly selections, avoiding R-rated films entirely. Most had handwritten return date policies. Due Tuesdays dumped in ink beside the title on paper rental cards slipped into each box. These cards tracked who rented what, occasionally amusing customers who saw a neighbor's name on last week's entry. The social aspects went beyond movie selection. Regulars exchanged recommendations with clerks who remembered their tastes. Teens flirted near the horror section, using scary movie rentals as date excuses. Parents bumped into school acquaintances while browsing, comparing notes on child-appropriate titles. Stores became community hubs where people lingered to chat as much as to rent, especially in smaller towns lacking other entertainment venues. As chains expanded in the late 1980s, some uniformity set in. Blockbuster's blue and yellow signage promised standardized selections, with computer systems replacing handwritten cards. Their no late fees guarantee actually involved converting overdue charges into purchase prices, a policy that survived numerous lawsuits. Still, even chains allowed local flavor store managers could order extra copies of films popular in their area, whether Bollywood hits or action flicks depending on the neighborhood. The economic impact extended beyond Hollywood. Rental stores employed local staff, typically movie buffs happy to discuss films between customers. Shopping centers valued them as traffic drivers, often giving prime storefront locations. Some stores diversified into game rentals when Nintendo took off, adding an extra income stream. Others sold candy and microwave popcorn at checkout, creating impulse purchase opportunities. The entire ecosystem relied on VHS tapes being durable enough for repeated handling, yet inexpensive enough to replace regularly. Home design adapted to accommodate rentals. Entertainment centers evolved to store growing tape collections, with some cabinets holding 50-plus titles in customized slots. Families organized tapes by genre or frequency of use, often debating categorization systems. Does Ghostbusters go in comedy or sci-fi? Coffee tables included hidden compartments for stashing rented tapes safely from children or pets. Retailers sold special cleaning cassettes and demagnetizing tools, promising to extend rental tape lifespans, though most people just tapped cassettes against their palms when the picture scrambled. What began as a practical service became a cultural ritual. The act of choosing a film together, reading box descriptions aloud, debating options. These created anticipation beyond just watching something at home. For children especially, Friday night rentals meant extended bedtimes and treats like staying up for second viewings. The stores themselves faded in the 2000s as DVDs and streaming emerged, but that era's shared experience of communal movie selection remains unmatched by algorithms suggesting what to watch next. Alone. When tapes finally disappeared from stores, they took with them certain unplanned discoveries, those chance encounters with unexpected films that browsing physical shelves once allowed. Chapter 4. Tape Hiss and Hi-Fi. Evolving Sound. Remember pressing play on an early VHS movie and noticing how thin the voices sounded? The original VHS audio delivered sound through a single linear track running along the tape's edge, much like a basic cassette. This system limited frequency response to about 100 Hz to 10 kHz for NTSC tapes, barely covering the range of human speech. Orchestral scores and music lost their richness, with high notes dulled and bass tones nearly absent. During dramatic scenes, background music often overwhelmed dialogue because the narrow frequency range couldn't separate sounds cleanly. Film soundtracks suffered particularly. Complex mixes from movies like Star Wars or Close Encounters compressed into muddy approximations. The tape format's signal-to-noise ratio of 42 dB meant constant hiss beneath quiet passages. Longer recordings made things worse. EP mode tapes peaked at just 4 kHz, turning songs into faint shadows of their original recordings. Viewers adjusted volume constantly to hear whispers over tape noise during quiet scenes, then rushed to lower it when explosions hit. Engineers first attempted stereo by splitting that single audio track into two narrower channels. While this let VHS indicate left-right separation, it halved the tape area for each channel, increasing hiss noticeably. The addition of Dolby B noise reduction helped somewhat by boosting quiet sounds during recording, then compressing them during playback. But this couldn't restore frequencies the tape physically couldn't store. Many stereos automatically switched to mono when playing these tapes to avoid the noise. Everything changed in 1984, when JVC introduced hi-fi audio to counter Betamax's beta hi-fi system. They applied a clever trick, modulating stereo audio onto FM carriers just like radio stations do, then embedding those signals within the video portion of the tape. This bypassed the linear track limitations entirely. Suddenly, VHS could reproduce full 20 Hz to 20 kHz frequency ranges with 70 decibels signal-to-noise ratios, rivaling compact discs. Channel separation exceeded 70 decibels, allowing precise directional effects in movies. The innovation worked through depth multiplexing, recording audio signals first at a deep magnetic level, then letting the video heads write over them at a shallower level. This let both coexist without major interference. Unlike linear tracks, hi-fi audio maintained quality across all recording speeds because it didn't rely on tape area. Movies recorded in EP mode now sounded nearly identical to SP recordings, a revelation for families building home libraries on budget tapes. Listening tests revealed stark differences. The helicopter attack in Apocalypse Now went from muted thumps to distinct rotor beats with visible directionality. Amidst the balance of the country's disdained Civil War action, our Flashdance soundtracks gained crisp hi-hats and punchy bass lines previously flattened. Broadway recordings like Cats finally reproduced the full orchestra without violins sounding like they played through blankets. Hi-Fi even improved dialogue clarity by separating voices from background elements more cleanly. Early adopters noticed quirks. During quiet scenes, some players emitted faint buzzing called head chatter from imperfect head switching, a side effect of the discontinuous recording method. Audio levels occasionally didn't match source material perfectly, making some sounds slightly softer or louder than intended. And because audio now relied on the video heads, damaged heads could degrade sound before picture quality suffered noticeably. Audiophiles dismissed VHS hi-fi at first, arguing analog tape couldn't match vinyl's warmth or CD's precision. They overlooked how most families played movies through TV speakers anyway, hardly high-fidelity systems. What mattered was experiencing films closer to theatrical quality at home. Hi-fi delivered soaring scores and subtle ambient effects linear tracks crushed. The opening crawl of Return of the Jedi now carried John Williams' brasses with proper weight, while text whooshed convincingly across speakers. Recording live music demonstrated hi-fi's capabilities. Taping a piano recital or jazz club performance preserved nuances linear tracks lost. The sustain pedals whisper, fingers sliding on guitar strings. Blank hi-fi tapes cost more, but musicians used them for decent quality demos when proper studios weren't available. Radio enthusiasts recorded off-air broadcasts with surprising fidelity, especially for classical stations with wide dynamic ranges. Movie studios gradually adapted mixing practices for home hi-fi. Earlier VHS releases often used theatrical mixes that assumed surround sound systems, leaving home viewers straining to hear dialogue. As hi-fi spread, engineers created specific stereo down mixes that prioritized center channel content. Directors like James Cameron started supervising these mixes personally. The Aliens hi-fi track famously boosted certain sound effects to compensate for home viewing conditions. Rental stores played an unexpected role in adoption. Their high turnover tapes wore out video heads faster than average home use. Since hi-fi audio relied on those same heads, stores reported audio degradation appearing before video artifacts, usually manifesting as intermittent buzzing during playback. Savvy renters learned to test audio during previews before committing to a movie. Stores eventually upgraded machines more frequently to maintain audio quality customers now expected. Hardware evolved with the format. Mid-1980s VCRs added audio level meters beside video controls, acknowledging hi-fi's importance. High-end models featured pitch control for musicians and separate audio outputs for external amplifiers. Some Laserdisc VHS combos allowed dubbing Laserdisc superior audio to hi-fi tapes, a popular practice among audio enthusiasts before affordable CD burners existed. The technology had limits. Copying hi-fi tapes introduced generational loss as each dub compounded minor imperfections. Certain VCRs struggled with consistency across tape brands. TDK tapes might play slightly brighter than Maxell on the same machine. And while specs matched CDs, analog tape harmonics still colored the sound differently than digital formats. Purists noted hi-fi couldn't reproduce CD silence between tracks perfectly, always carrying faint tape noise. Children's cartoons revealed another quirk. Early morning recordings often picked up interference from adjacent TV channels' audio carriers during station sign-ons. Hi-fi's wider frequency response captured these stray signals. Some viewers reported hearing faint gospel music beneath Saturday morning cartoons when stations overlapped frequencies improperly. Linear tracks rarely noticed such artifacts. As VHS matured, audio became a selling point. Boxes highlighted prominently. Digitally mastered audio stickers appeared alongside hi-fi stereo badges. Though digital here simply meant the source transfer method, not tape storage. Some music companies experimented with releasing albums on VHS. The format's 90 decibels dynamic range suited classical music particularly well, though the idea never surpassed CDs. The improvement, changed viewing habits. Families turned up volumes for musicals like The Sound of Music, no longer frustrated by lost orchestral detail. Horror movies gained effectiveness with proper low-frequency impacts. John Carpenter's synthesized Halloween score chilled more through hi-fi's extended bass. Even television recordings improved when local stations broadcast in stereo during the late 1980s, letting home viewers preserve sitcom laugh tracks and sports announcers with full clarity. By the 1990s, hi-fi became standard, while linear tracks served as backups if errors occurred. Later machines couldn't disable hi-fi even if users preferred the sometimes cleaner, if limited linear sound for voice recordings. Engineers refined the system continuously, reducing head chatter, improving level consistency, and minimizing interference between audio and chroma signals. The original 1984 implementation remained remarkably forward-thinking, requiring no fundamental changes as VHS peaked. Studios occasionally misused the capabilities. Some low-budget releases simply transferred mono mixes to both stereo channels rather than creating proper stereo versions. Others applied excessive noise reduction that flattened dynamics, ironically diminishing hi-fi's advantages. But when properly utilized, the system proved shockingly capable. The helicopter sequence in Blue Thunder remained a standard demo track for testing home theater setups well into the DVD era. Audio cassette comparisons demonstrate the leap. A standard 60-minute audio cassette offered about 0.5 square inches of tape area per stereo channel per second. Hi-Fi VHS provided nearly 50 times that. 24 square inches per channel per second in SP mode, by utilizing the full tape width diagonally. This enormous increase in available tape real estate enabled the dramatic quality improvement, hidden cleverly within existing tape formulations. The legacy persists. Modern streaming services still struggle with audio compression that sometimes recalls early linear VHS limitations. Flattened dynamics during loud scenes, lost subtlety in quiet ones. Hi-Fi VHS proved good enough analog audio could satisfy most listeners if engineered thoughtfully. Those stacked black cassettes in basements often contain recordings that still surprise with their fidelity when played today. A testament to an innovation that made movie nights sound as good as they looked. Chapter 5. Super VHS and Cousins. The format grows up. Remember, rewinding through your early home recordings and noticing how faces never appeared quite sharp, how edges blurred together. Standard VHS offered about 240 lines of resolution, enough to recognize expressions but not subtle details. The color often bled slightly outside lines, and red shirts tinting cheeks pink in close-ups. Concert recordings suffered especially, with spotlights flattening into glowing blobs, and individual instruments merging on stage. Viewers accepted these limitations until better TVs revealed how much detail the tapes actually lost. JVC addressed this quietly in 1987 with Super VHS, a specification that nearly doubled resolution to 400 lines. The improvement came from separating luminance and chrominance color signals that standard VHS combined. This reduced color bleeding and preserved finer details. Suddenly, the freckles on a child's nose or text on distant street signs became visible in home recordings. The format required special tapes with finer grain magnetic particles, though they physically fit ordinary VHS machines. SVHS found unexpected popularity with industrial and educational users before reaching consumers. School AV departments appreciated capturing microscope images or handwriting demonstrations clearly. Small businesses used it for product training videos where part numbers and labels needed legibility. Wedding videographers adopted it slowly. The cameras remained bulky, but clients noticed sharper portraits in finished tapes. These professional uses subsidized early production until prices gradually dropped for home users. The palm-sized VHS-C camcorder changed family gatherings when it debuted in 1982. Roughly the size of a paperback book, it let parents record birthday parties while blocking others' views. The compact cassettes held just 30 minutes in standard play, but an adapter let them play in home VCRs. No special equipment needed. Kids could operate them too, leading to shaky but treasured footage of school plays and vacations. Grandparents particularly favored these models. Their lightweight design eased arthritis strain compared to larger units. Extended play mode transformed ordinary VHS use. By slowing tape speed, a T120 tape could hold 6 hours of content in EP mode, enough for 3 baseball games or an entire miniseries marathon. The picture quality suffered noticeably, with more noise and tracking errors, but for talk shows or news broadcasts, viewers accepted the trade-off. College students recorded whole semesters of late-night lectures this way, labeling tapes meticulously along their spines. The longest tapes, like the T160, stretched to 8 hours, perfect for unattended daytime recordings while at work. JVC hedged its bets by making SVHS machines backward compatible. They played standard VHS tapes normally, encouraging upgraders who feared losing access to existing collections. This thoughtful design mirrored VHS's original ethos, prioritizing convenience over forcing transitions. Savvy buyers realized an SVHS recorder could improve playback of even ordinary tapes slightly, by processing their signals more cleanly. The machines recognized tape types automatically via small holes in their shells, switching modes without user intervention. VHS-C's limitations sparked creativity. The 30-minute maximum in SP mode went careful event planning. Parents timed ceremonies to fit, sometimes missing endings to conserve tape. This constraint birthed the home video edit, letting the camera run during important moments, then pausing during dull stretches. The format's small size had unanticipated benefits. Teachers could tape student presentations discreetly, without intimidating shy children with large equipment. Hi8 and other competing formats challenged but never overcame VHS-C's advantages. Sony's products offered sharper images but required different playback equipment, breaking the universal compatibility VHS enjoyed. Families sticking with VHS could share tapes effortlessly, a key factor during holidays when multiple households might swap recordings. The simple mechanical adapter for VHS-C tapes cost under $20, versus hundreds for format converters between incompatible systems. Industrial users pushed SVHS to unexpected places. Law enforcement used it for surveillance, where clearer images helped identify suspects from security footage. Scientists recorded experiments at 1,000 frames per second, using modified SVHS decks, analyzing motions too fast for normal vision. Even animators employed it for pencil test roughs, where the improved resolution showed line quality better than standard VHS could. The formats coexisted strangely in stores. SVHS blanks occupied small sections at electronic shops, often stocked behind counters to prevent theft of the premium-priced tapes. Sales staff reported customers touching the boxes curiously, but hesitating at prices triple those of standard blanks. Most eventually chose familiar VHS unless specifically needing the upgrade for camcorders or special projects. Home users discovered practical differences between tape brands. Fujifilm tapes handled high contrast scenes best, preventing bright skies from washing out. TDK offered the cleanest audio reproduction for music recordings. Budget tapes worked fine for soap operas but showed more dropouts during dark horror movie scenes. Collectors developed strong preferences. sometimes driving to distant stores that carried favored brands their local shops didn't stock. SVHS's underuse in Hollywood disappointed videophiles. Few movies saw SVHS releases. Studios feared cannibalizing Laserdisc sales to home theater enthusiasts. Those that did release often charged premium pricing, slowing adoption. The format's true value emerged in recording live events, where its clarity preserved details like wedding dress lace patterns or football jersey numbers that standard VHS blurred. The VHS ecosystem expanded with accessories tailored to these formats. Special carrying cases protected VHS-C camcorders while leaving them instantly ready to record. SVHS-compatible editing controllers allowed crude cuts between scenes for homemade movies. Enhanced cleaning cassettes addressed SVHS machines' tighter tolerance, preventing misalignments that standard VHS tolerated. Even TV guides began noting which shows supported stereo broadcasts worth capturing on upgraded equipment. Technical quirks emerged. Some SVHS recordings displayed exaggerated edge enhancement on standard VCRs, an unintended side effect of the luminance processing. Viewers reported that old black and white movies copied to SVHS sometimes gained a metallic sheen unrelated to their original look. The formats remained analog despite improvements, inheriting all tapes' fragility. A single crease could ruin an hour's recording irreparably. Families developed rituals around these technologies. Parents reserved SVHS tapes for milestone events like graduations, using standard blanks for daily recordings. The compact cameras enabled spontaneous moments previous generations never captured. A toddler's first steps, a surprise visit from relatives. The tactile experience differed too. VHS-C cassettes snapped satisfyingly into their adapters, while SVHS boxes felt subtly heavier than regular ones, signaling their premium nature. Oddly, these formats extended VHS's lifespan against newer digital options. Well into the DVD era, event videographers stuck with SVHS for its reliability. No discs to skip or files to corrupt. Grandparents appreciated that VHS-C tapes couldn't be accidentally erased by refrigerator magnets, like early digital media. The analog systems degraded gradually, rather than failing abruptly, giving warning through increasing snow before becoming unplayable. Educational institutions became late adopters. Schools bought SVHS equipment in the 1990s to replace aging film projectors, valuing the format's durability in children's hands. Libraries circulated language courses and fitness tapes on VHS-C well into the 2000s, as patrons resisted switching to unfamiliar formats. Even airports used them for safety briefings, trusting the proven technology over glitch-prone digital alternatives. Looking back, these variants demonstrated analog's untapped potential. The jump from 240 to 400 lines of resolution showed how much image quality had been squeezed into existing tapes all along. S-FHS-C proved miniaturization didn't require digital technology, just clever mechanical design. And the extended recording times revealed how flexible magnetic tape could be when engineers prioritized capacity over other concerns. Yet the market moved on. Younger viewers raised on DVDs found even SVHS inadequate for large modern TVs. Digital camcorder offered instant playback and editing that tape couldn't match. The last SVHS recorders disappeared from stores around 2003, though repair parts remained available longer for professional users. What these formats really represented was analog video's final maturation, proof that the humble VHS cassette still had room to grow before its eventual replacement. Some specialists still use SVHS for niches where its virtues remain relevant. Amateur astronomers record telescope eyepiece views with its balanced quality and affordability. Vintage gaming enthusiasts prefer it for capturing CRT screen images without digital artifacts. And in developing regions, the robustness of the HSC cameras makes them practical long after support ended elsewhere. The formats live on where their particular strengths outweigh the convenience of newer options. A quiet testament to thoughtful engineering that anticipated needs beyond ordinary home video. Those interested can still find SVHS blanks at surplus sales or specialty shops, often unused in original packaging. Pop one into an old machine today, and the quality difference remains noticeable. Fine details in wood grain or fabric patterns emerge clearly. It serves as a reminder that technological progress isn't always linear. Sometimes improvements come not from abandoning formats, but from understanding them more deeply. The best analog systems achieved excellence by working within their limits, rather than fighting them. A lesson easy to forget in today's pursuit of constant upgrades. As these tapes age, their magnetic particles gradually lose strength, just like standard VHS. But those that survive still play back remarkably well, their enhanced signals resisting degradation slightly better than ordinary recordings. They preserve memories not just in content, but in the quality of the moments captured. A child's eyelashes visible in sunlight, a musician's fingers positioned precisely on guitar strings. These small intimacies, saved through incremental technical advances, may be the format's most lasting legacy. Chapter 6. The Beginning of the End. DVD arrives. Remember nervously sliding that first shiny disc into your player, wondering if it would skip? DVDs arrived in 1997, looking like CDs, but promising more. Movies without snow or hiss, bonus features instead of just opening credits. That first time you pushed the tray closed and waited, it felt more like loading a computer game than preparing to watch a film. The quiet hum of the disc spinning up sounded different from the mechanical clunk of a VHS tape engaging. Early adopters kept looking at their empty VCR slots from habit, surprised when the movie started without the familiar tape transport noises. Studios treated DVDs cautiously at first. Only about 30 titles were available in the US that first year, mostly older films or special editions. Hollywood worried about cannibalizing VHS sales, so new releases still came to tape months before disc. The first DVDs cost around $25 each. Expensive compared to bargain VHS tapes, but cheaper than collector's editions. Rental stores added a few discs to their new release walls, but kept most stock on VHS to meet existing demand. Many customers eyed the shiny rectangles suspiciously, unsure if they'd play properly on older TVs. The physical differences stood out immediately. DVDs weighed less than 2 ounces, while a typical VHS tape was nearly a pound. Where he'd built muscles lifting boxes of tapes, these new discs felt like handling fragile plates. The plastic cases made a sharper click when opened, compared to the muffled thump of a video cassette shell. Some people missed the tactile ritual. No more rewinding tapes by hand when the machine wouldn't cooperate. No more peeling rental stickers off cardboard sleeves. Discs seemed almost too perfect with their pristine surfaces, lacking the character of worn tape labels. Early DVD owners faced new frustrations. A single fingerprint could make movies freeze during key scenes. Children who'd learned to handle VHS tapes carefully enough suddenly rendered discs unplayable by touching their shiny sides. Rental stores began charging cleaning fees for smudged returns, though some customers swore they'd return them spotless. Unlike tapes that degraded gradually, DVDs failed abruptly. One deep scratch and the whole movie might become unwatchable halfway through. People developed new habits, handling discs by the edges and returning them to cases immediately after use.
Disney's 2001 releases marked a turning point. Animated classics like Snow White debuted on DVD with crisp transfers that revealed details VHS had purred for decades.
The included restoration features showed side-by-side comparisons, making tapes look ancient overnight. Parents noticed their children could now spot background characters and read distant signs that had been muddy smears before. Disney released these in distinctive white keep cases, distinguishing them from ordinary DVDs, just as their clamshell VHS cases had stood out earlier. Within months, families started replacing their worn tape collections with discs. Rental habits shifted subtly. Whereas families might keep a favorite VHS tape for years, rewatching until the image faded, DVDs encouraged constant turnover. The smaller size made returns easier, no more bulky tapes to lug back. Late fees remained but felt less annoying since you didn't have to rewind. Some stores installed automated kiosks where you could return discs anytime, eliminating human interaction. The ritual of rewinding before returning faded away, taking with it that last moment of reflection on the movie you'd just watched. Special features changed viewing behaviors. Suddenly, watching the film wasn't enough. You needed to view deleted scenes, director commentaries, making of documentaries. Where VHS bonus content meant maybe a trailer or two, DVDs offered hours of extras, organized in menus. People spent evenings exploring these, instead of immediately rewatching the main feature. Some films like The Matrix hid Easter eggs leading to secret content, rewarding repeated viewings in ways tapes never could. The ability to jump directly to any scene made DVDs feel more interactive compared to fast-forwarding through tapes. Technological limitations emerged too. DVDs didn't record television, like VHS could, unless you bought expensive DVD-R machines. The digital menus sometimes froze on early players, requiring unplugging the whole unit to reset. Discs left in hot cars warped slightly, causing playback issues. Tapes never suffered. While DVDs didn't degrade with playback like magnetic tape, poorly manufactured discs developed disc rot, where layers separated over time. Some early releases from smaller studios became unplayable within a few years, despite careful storage. Picture quality revealed VHS's flaws in hindsight. Watching the same film on both formats showed how much detail tapes had lost. Textures in clothing, background signs, facial expressions during dark scenes. Widescreen films no longer required pan and scan cropping, showing the full image theaters had displayed. The lack of generational loss meant DVD copies stayed sharp even after multiple viewings, while VHS copies of copies degraded noticeably. Film grain became visible rather than blending into analog noise, pleasing purists who disliked the soft VHS look. Audio improvements matched the visual leap. Surround sound options like Dolby Digital 5.1 created immersive experiences VHS's stereo tracks couldn't approach. Hearing helicopter sounds move smoothly around the room in Apocalypse Now, or feeling dinosaur footsteps vibrate the floor in Jurassic Park, showcased possibilities beyond analog limits. Dialogue clarity improved dramatically. No more boosting volume to hear whispers, then turning it down for explosions. Music tracks benefited especially, with concert DVDs preserving live performances far beyond what tape could capture. The change affected hardware sales patterns. People upgraded televisions to appreciate DVD quality, seeking flat screens that didn't distort widescreen images. Home theater systems replaced basic TV speakers to enjoy surround sound properly.
Retailers bundled DVD players with audio systems, leveraging the format to sell entire entertainment upgrades. VCRs remained in bedrooms and kids' rooms where recording mattered more, but living room setups focused on DVD playback. Manufacturers added progressive scan outputs and component video connections that VHS had never utilized fully. Packaging evolved with the new format. Thin plastic cases saved shelf space compared to bulky VHS boxes, letting stores display more titles. Hardcover collector's editions appeared with elaborate booklets and slipcovers, targeting devoted fans willing to pay premium prices. The uniformity of DVD spines created neat rows on shelves where VHS collections had mixed sizes and colors. Some missed the old clamshell cases that protected tapes better. DVDs rattled loosely in their thin holders if stored vertically, occasionally slipping out entirely. Children interacted differently with discs. Toddlers who'd enjoyed inserting cassette tapes struggled with delicate disc handling. Parents distracted them with special kids editions in durable phone cases that survived drops better. Rewinding disappeared entirely. Kids just pressed play again immediately, changing how they experienced stories. Bonus features sometimes overshadowed main films, with youngsters obsessively watching deleted scenes or animated menus rather than the actual movie. Some children never learned to operate VCRs at all, growing up in disc-only households. Rental stores adapted awkwardly. Blockbuster phased out late fees in 2004 to compete with Netflix's mail-order DVDs, though their policy actually converted unpaid rentals into purchases after a grace period. Smaller stores struggled to maintain both formats as shelf space became limited. Some cleverly marketed used DVDs as permanent additions to home libraries, where tapes had been seen as temporary. The iconic Be Kind Rewind stickers faded from memory, as no one rewound discs unless revisiting special features. Public perceptions of quality shifted permanently. Where VHS tapes had been good enough for generations, DVDs made people expect pristine images at home. The rare films only available on tape now looked disappointingly fuzzy compared to new digital transfers. Audiophiles who dismissed home video sound embraced DVD's lossless options. Even casual viewers noticed when television broadcasts didn't match their disc copies. Suddenly live sports or award shows seemed slightly blurrier than remembered. The signature aspects of VHS became flaws in this new context. Tracking lines that had been routine now looked like equipment failures. The slight warble in tape audio stood out after hearing clean digital tracks. Rewinding seemed like wasted time rather than preparation for the next viewer. Where people had patiently adjusted VCR tracking controls, they now expected flawless playback immediately. That tolerance for analog imperfections disappeared almost overnight after experiencing consistent digital quality. Production companies abandoned VHS reluctantly. The last major Hollywood VHS release was A History of Violence in 2006, nearly a decade after DVDs debuted. Some studios continued making blank tapes longer for camcorder users and security systems. Educational publishers stuck with VHS into the 2010s as schools slowly upgraded equipment. Niche markets like exercise tapes or religious programming lasted even longer, catering to audiences slow to adopt new technology. But the cultural center had shifted decisively toward digital formats by the mid-2000s. People gradually forgot VHS's advantages. The ability to record over tapes infinitely got lost in DVD-R's limited rights. Durability against scratches mattered less as streaming reduced physical media handling. That satisfying mechanical operation of cassette decks became nostalgia rather than functionality. Only when discs froze or skipped did some recall how VHS might have played through minor damage.
Even then, DVD's pristine moments outweighed these frustrations for most viewers. The shift affected content creation too. Directors composed shots knowing home viewers could freeze and examine frames closely. DVD extras encouraged Easter eggs and hidden content impossible on linear tape. Special effects teams worked knowing their details wouldn't blur together in MPG compression as they had in analog noise. The entire creative process adjusted to this sharper, more permanent presentation medium over time. On store shelves, the space between VHS and DVD sections told the story. Video stores' back walls once held racks of tapes, with a small DVD display near checkout. Slowly these areas inverted. DVDs dominated while VHS huddled in shrinking clearance sections. New releases stopped coming on tape entirely, making the format seem increasingly outdated. Eventually, workers consolidated remaining VHS tapes into a single rack, then just a few titles on end caps. The transition happened gradually, but irreversibly, like watching seasons change day by day. DVDs didn't kill VHS immediately. The formats coexisted for nearly a decade, with VHS declining year by year. Many households kept VCRs connected even after buying DVD players, using them for recording or playing old tapes. Children who grew up with both often preferred the familiar tapes, while adults embraced discs' convenience. It wasn't until combo units merged both technologies that single-format living became normal. Even today, some VCRs remain hooked up in basements and rec rooms, playing childhood recordings no disc can replace. The psychological shift mattered most though. DVD trained us to expect menus instead of countdowns, immediate scene access rather than rewinding, perfect playback as the norm. That expectation structure made streaming's later arrival smoother. We'd already learned digital viewing behaviors. Yet something intangible disappeared when tapes faded away. The physical interaction with media changed from loading tangible objects to pressing abstract buttons. Those early days of cautious disk handling were the first steps toward today's invisible streaming files, each format moving us further from tactile connections to our entertainment. Chapter 7. Last Tapes Rolling. The final chapter. The VCR in your parents' basement still sits there, probably unplugged now. The clock display hasn't shown the right time in years. Dust gathers in the cassette compartment, the same space that once swallowed so many Friday night rentals. These machines didn't disappear overnight. They faded from use gradually, like an old sweater you stop wearing but can't bring yourself to throw away. Some households kept using VHS well into the 2010s. Grandparents continued recording their stories for grandchildren, on tapes labeled in shaky handwriting. Schools still showed educational films on VHS, because replacing decades of media took time and money. Churches circulated sermon tapes to shut-ins who'd never upgraded their equipment. These holdouts weren't resisting progress. They simply had systems that still worked for their needs. When the last Blockbuster removed its VHS section in the late 2000s, regulars complained until the store saved a few titles behind the counter, just for them. The final blow came quietly in July 2016. Funai, the last company making VCRs, shut down production. Their Sanyo-branded players had been selling barely 750,000 units annually worldwide, down from over 15 million at VHS's peak. Component shortages made continuing impractical, though few noticed the announcement. Stores quietly sold remaining stock over the next year, often to people replacing worn-out units rather than new adopters. The last machine rolled off the line, without ceremony, ending 4 decades of production. Schools and libraries became unexpected final frontiers for VHS. Budget constraints meant replacing thousands of educational tapes took years. Some teachers kept personal collections of rare documentaries never released digitally. Librarians reported elderly patrons refusing to learn DVD menus, preferring the simple play button they'd used for 30 years. Special collections housing local history often contained unique tapes, oral histories, town meetings, school plays, that no one had transferred to modern formats. These institutions didn't choose VHS out of nostalgia, but because abandoning it meant losing access to irreplaceable content. Clearing out old tapes became a ritual for many families. Parents would open a box labeled Home Videos to find tapes marked Christmas 1992 or Jamie's birthday. Some tried playing them first, noticing how the colors had faded over time. Others donated stacks to thrift stores where they sat unsold for years. A few precious tapes might get converted to digital, but many simply disappeared during moves or cleanouts. Those who kept them found the cassettes became time capsules, not just of the events recorded, but of the handwritten labels and stickers that showed which moments had seemed worth saving decades earlier. VHS clung to life in surprising places. The last Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon, still rents tapes to nostalgic customers and curious tourists. Some filmmakers deliberately use VHS for its analog aesthetic in horror movies and music videos. Astronauts even took a VCR to the International Space Station in 2001, because its reliability outweighed newer options. These niche uses remind us that technologies rarely die completely. They just become specialized tools rather than everyday items. The format's afterlife took unexpected forms. Thrift store tapes became raw material for artists crafting sculptures and jewelry. Film archives digitized rare VHS-only releases that studios had forgotten. YouTube channels specialized in preserving the unique distortions and artifacts of tape playback as a distinct experience. Even the once reviled tracking lines became nostalgic effects people tried recreating digitally. What had been technological limitations were now stylistic choices, valued for their imperfections. In attics and basements, VHS tapes remain largely intact. Unlike old digital files that won't open on modern computers, these analog recordings still play, if you can find a working machine. The magnetic particles lose strength over decades, but carefully stored tapes from the 1980s often look and sound nearly as they did when recorded. There's something reassuring about that durability, about knowing those wedding videos and birthday parties still exist in physical form, rather than as vulnerable data on a hard drive. Funny's shutdown reflected a simple truth. We'd already moved on emotionally long before production ceased. The last buyers weren't choosing VHS for its quality or features, but because it connected them to memories. A teacher might want one last machine to show students how their parents watched movies. A grandparent could hope to revisit home videos without learning new technology. These purchases weren't about the equipment itself, but what it represented. A bridge to moments that felt increasingly distant in our digital age. The tapes themselves reveal how viewing habits changed. Early home recordings often show families carefully dressed to appear on camera. Later ones capture more candid moments as people grew comfortable being filmed. The transition from bulky camcorders to palm-sized models shows in shakier footage that somehow feels more real. Even commercial tapes evolved. Compare early pan and scan transfers that chopped off sides of movies to later widescreen releases that preserved directors' visions. Each generation of tapes documents not just the content, but how we chose to experience it. Rental stores lingered longest in rural areas with slow internet. Towns where streaming services struggled found customers still willing to browse physical shelves. Some independent shops kept VHS sections active well past 2010 for patrons without DVD players. These places became community archives by accident, their aging tape libraries preserving films that hadn't made the digital transition. When they finally closed, entire catalogs of obscure titles effectively disappeared from public access. The machine's durability worked against their preservation. Unlike fragile vinyl records that needed careful handling, VCRs often got discarded simply because people assumed worn-out ones couldn't be fixed. In reality, many just needed belt replacements or head cleanings. Repair shops that once serviced VCRs gradually stopped carrying parts, forcing owners to cannibalize other machines for components. This made working units increasingly rare, even as tapes remained plentiful. Certain institutions maintained VHS out of necessity. Prisons continued using them for educational programs because discs could be made into weapons more easily. Hospitals kept tapes for patient education videos that hadn't been updated digitally. Even some airlines still had tape-based in-flight entertainment systems well into the 2010s, as upgrading entire fleets proved costly. These practical applications had little to do with nostalgia. The format persisted because replacing entire infrastructure takes time. Children today encounter VHS as artifacts rather than technology. They're fascinated by the mechanical process, how the tape winds through visible spools, how rewinding takes actual time. Some think the tracking static looks like intentional special effects. Parents report kids preferring tape versions of familiar movies because the imperfections make them feel more authentic. It's an odd reversal, young viewers appreciating the very flaws their parents once complained about. The tactile experience remains unmatched. Sliding a cassette from its box feels different than handling discs or selecting streaming thumbnails. The weight of a tape in your hand provides subconscious feedback that you've chosen something substantial. Even simple actions, lining up labels neatly on shelves, peeling rental stickers off cases, created minor rituals around media consumption. Digital libraries can't replicate the physicality of browsing a shelf, where you recognize particular tapes by spineware. VHS collectors now preserve not just the content, but the packaging. Original clamshell cases with their unique artwork became valuable. Specialty shops sell empty boxes to collectors, replacing lost ones. Even factory-sealed blank tapes find buyers wanting to experience the new packaging they remember from childhood. These artifacts document how studios marketed films before digital distribution, when cover art had to grab attention from video store shelves rather than tiny streaming thumbnails. The format's legacy appears in unexpected places. Modern interfaces still use tape icons for recording symbols. The phrase "rewind" persists even with no tape to wind back. Young filmmakers add VHS-style effects to create intentional nostalgia in their work. Even our concept of watching movies at home still follows patterns VHS established. Communal viewings, pause breaks, starting films whenever you want rather than at showtimes. These conventions feel natural now, but were revolutionary in the cassette era. Production notes on early DVDs reveal Hollywood's transition. Some commentary tracks mention adjusting films for home viewing in ways pioneered for VHS. Brightening dark scenes, simplifying complicated audio mixes. Directors recall first seeing their work on tape and realizing how TV screens changed the experience. Even today's 4K remasters sometimes reference VHS as a benchmark for what not to do, avoiding the excessive edge enhancement and noise reduction that characterized later tape releases.
The psychological shift became clear as tapes disappeared. People stopped thinking of movies as physical objects taking up shelf space. Digital libraries could grow infinitely without clutter, changing how we value individual titles. Where VHS collections reflected careful curation, each purchase or recording representing an intentional choice, streaming services encourage endless sampling. The friction of physical media had silently shaped our relationship with content in ways we only noticed in its absence. That dusty VCR still works if you plug it in. The tapes might need a few passes to loosen up old lubricants, but the images will appear, fuzzier than remembered, but intact. Unlike formats that became unplayable due to technological abandonment, VHS persists through sheer mechanical simplicity. There's comfort in that reliability, in knowing these artifacts from decades past still perform their original function without updates or compatibility checks. Funni's final VCRs weren't much different from 1980s models. They lacked the build quality of vintage units, but included modern conveniences like HDMI outputs. This hybrid design symbolized the format's transitional role, bridging analog traditions to digital expectations. The last machines weren't bought to record new memories, but to preserve access to old ones. When production ceased, it simply confirmed what our viewing habits had already decided. We'd moved on not just technologically, but emotionally. Yet in quiet moments, you might still find someone sliding a tape into a decades-old VCR. The whirring mechanism, the tracking adjustments, the slight delay before playback begins, these sensations trigger memories no streaming service can replicate. The tapes themselves become portals, their magnetic patterns holding not just images and sounds, but the weight of countless evenings when that soft mechanical noise meant family time, shared stories, and the simple pleasure of pressing play. The last VCR left the factory without fanfare, because its work was done. Generations had grown up with its distinctive sounds imprinted in their minds. The clunk of a tape inserting, the chirp of fast-forward stopping, the hollow thump of hitting eject. These sounds marked transitions in our homes, signaling when entertainment began and ended. Their absence leaves a space filled by silent digital menus, more convenient perhaps, but lacking the physical rituals that once framed our viewing experiences. VHS tapes remain scattered across homes worldwide, waiting for someone to blow the dust off their cases. Some contain Hollywood movies available in higher quality elsewhere. Others hold homemade moments frozen in magnetic patterns, first steps, birthday candles, voices of loved ones gone. These are the tapes people can't discard, even without working players. They represent a time when sharing videos meant handing someone a physical object charged with meaning, rather than sending a link that might expire. The format's true legacy isn't in the technology, but in how it taught us to hold moments in our hands before we learned to let them float in clouds. Those last production line VCRs now age alongside the ones they were meant to replace. Their plastic may last longer than the older models' metal frames, but their mechanisms face the same eventual fate. Yet somewhere, a child will discover a box of tapes and ask what they are. Someone will hunt down a working player, connect it to a modern TV, and press play. The images will appear, bridging decades in an instant. And for a little while, that soft whirring sound will fill the room again, reminding us that some technologies fade, but never quite disappear, while memories remain, to be rewound. Chapter 8. Rewound but not forgotten. The Collector's Revival. The thrill hits when you spot that faded rectangular case at a garage sale, the familiar title peeking out beneath a layer of dust. Maybe it's a Disney Black Diamond edition, or an obscure horror flick with hand-drawn cover art. Your fingers remember the weight before you even pick it up.
This is how VHS collecting began its unexpected comeback in the early 2020s, drawing in both those who grew up with tapes and newcomers fascinated by analog relics. What started as niche hobby became a cultural phenomenon. Online marketplaces saw rare tapes selling for hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars. A sealed copy of Back to the Future fetched $25,000 at auction. Collectors hunted for limited releases, discontinued films, and oddities that never made the digital transition. The rarer the tape, the more intense the pursuit. Some titles became legendary, like the 1983 horror film Blood Cult, of which only a handful of tapes exist. Studios inadvertently fueled this revival by leaving certain films trapped in the VHS era. Copyright disputes, lost masters, or simple negligence meant some movies never got DVD or streaming releases. The 1990 drama American Pie, not to be confused with the later comedy, exists only on tape, a fact that sent collectors scrambling when rediscovered. Horror films particularly suffered this fate, with gritty B-movies from the 80s remaining stubbornly analog. For fans, finding these meant preserving pieces of cinematic history that corporations had overlooked. Conventions became pilgrimage sites for tape enthusiasts. Horror Hound Weekend in Ohio dedicated entire sections to VHS vendors. Collectors traded stories about flea market finds while examining rare editions under fluorescent lights. The camaraderie mirrored comic book fandom, complete with heated debates over which tape transfer of Halloween looked best. Some attendees lugged portable VCRs to instantly test purchases, adjusting tracking controls on hotel TVs. The events proved physical media still had devotees willing to dig through bins for hours. Tactile qualities defined the appeal. Unlike streaming's invisible files, VHS demanded interaction. You felt the cassette click into place, heard the mechanism engage. The slight resistance when ejecting a tape, the way some boxes smelled faintly of aged plastic. These sensory details created connections no digital service could replicate. Collectors spoke of tapes having personalities. Some hissed more than others. Certain brands played smoother, all developing quirks over time. Handling them became ritualistic, rather than utilitarian. Hardcore collectors developed meticulous maintenance routines. They'd clean tape heads monthly with isopropyl alcohol and cotton swabs. Some used demagnetizers to restore worn sections. Repairing broken tapes involved carefully splicing damaged film with clear adhesive. Storage conditions mattered too. Temperature-controlled rooms prevented sticky shed syndrome, where tapes deteriorated chemically. The most devoted tracked humidity levels, like archivists preserving ancient scrolls. Condition determined value. Sealed tapes commanded premium prices, their shrink wrap intact after decades. Grading systems emerged: mint, near mint, very good, with slight flaws affecting worth. A creased J-card, the paper insert, could halve a tape's value. Water damage, or mold, rendered most copies worthless, though some salvaged rare titles by transferring content to fresh cassettes. Collectors learned to spot tape rain, white speckles indicating oxidation, through plastic case windows before purchasing. Special features added allure. Unlike streaming's uniform presentations, VHS often contained unique extras. Early Disney tapes included previews for long-gone theme park attractions. Some horror releases featured handmade trailers taped over the FBI piracy warnings. Audio commentaries existed decades before DVDs. Filmmakers sometimes recorded liner notes on separate audio cassettes included with movie tapes. These accidents of history became precious artifacts,
showcasing how media once circulated. Packaging told its own story. Clamshell cases gave way to cheaper slip cases in the 90s, a change collectors now track for dating purposes. Early tapes featured lavish booklets, later ones just Xeroxing chapter lists, rental stickers layered like archaeology, local video store decals buried beneath later owner markings. Some covers gained value for misprints, like the original Little Mermaid VHS with its famously phallic castle spire. The physical objects documented changing design sensibilities alongside their contents. The community thrived on shared knowledge. Online forums dissected minute tape variations. Did this release use the 1987 or 1992 transfer? Collectors traded spreadsheets tracking which tapes contained commercial bumpers versus straight-to-feature playback. Facebook groups identified obscure production companies from their logo animations. This collective wisdom helped newcomers navigate a market where sellers sometimes misrepresented items knowingly or not. Technological limitations became attractions. Tracking lines and color bleeding now signify authenticity for proof something's genuinely vintage rather than digitally altered. Some intentionally seek tapes with timecode burns or channel call letters from long-dead TV stations. These errors document how people actually watched media, not sterile studio masters. The flaws make each tape unique historical documents, rather than mass-produced copies. Certain genres dominated collecting. Horror led the resurgence. Its gritty aesthetic suited analog imperfections. Sci-fi and action followed, their practical effects looking more tangible on tape than CGI-heavy modern complainants. Animated films remained popular for nostalgic viewers who remembered weekend rental rituals. Even workout tapes found new audiences among irony-loving millennials and genuine VHS exercise devotees. Each category developed its own subculture of specialists. Equipment mattered as much as tapes. High-end VCRs from the 90s became prized. JVC's HRS 7600 or Mitsubishi's HSHD 2000 for their superior playback. Some collectors use industrial tape decks from universities or TV stations for best quality. Others enjoy the challenge of making budget machines perform beyond specs. The hunt for working remotes, often lost over decades, developed its own cottage industry. Without functioning players, collections became unusable museums. Cultural institutions took notice. The Video Home Video Foundation launched in 2021 to preserve rare tapes, transferring endangered content digitally. Museums staged VHS exhibits showcasing cover art evolution. Even mainstream media reported on the revival, though often framing it as quirky nostalgia rather than serious preservation. This attention brought new collectors into the fold, while validating longtime enthusiasts' passions. The economic reality remained complicated. While headline-grabbing sales occurred, most tapes sold for under $20. Many collectors focused on personal connections rather than potential profits, childhood favorites, or rarities missed during initial releases. Still, the speculative market impacted availability. Common tapes once dumped at Goodwill now appeared on eBay for inflated prices. Some lamented the hobby becoming monetized, though others welcomed wider recognition. Physical media's advantages persisted. Unlike streaming licenses that vanish, tapes kept working regardless of corporate decisions. Their standalone nature appealed in an era of fractured platforms. Watching a VHS meant committing no pausing to check phones, no algorithm suggesting distractions. The forced linearity created focus increasingly rare elsewhere. Collectors often described losing themselves in movies more completely on tape. Production techniques evolved to serve collectors.
Small labels like Lunchmeat VHS release obscure horror on new old stock blanks. Artists create original films shot on vintage cameras for authenticity. Tape traders circulate mixtapes of commercial bumpers and retro ads. This cottage industry thrives outside mainstream entertainment, sustained by enthusiasts willing to pay for craftsmanship streaming can't provide. The 2024 release of Alien Romulus on VHS marked a turning point. Major studios hadn't issued commercial tapes since 2007. This limited edition, complete with retro-style packaging, legitimized collectors' passions. Fans debated whether it signaled wider revival or remained novelty. Either way, it proved VHS retained cultural currency. Beyond nostalgia, it offered experiences contemporary formats couldn't duplicate. Psychologically, collecting filled gaps digital convenience created. Hunting for tapes provided serendipity absent from algorithm-driven streaming. The randomness of flea market bins mirrored how audiences once encountered films, through chance rather than calculation. Collectors often spoke about loving this unpredictability, as much as the tapes themselves. Nostalgia intertwined with curation. Displaying collections became performative, carefully organized shelves signaling identity. Some arranged tapes chronologically by acquisition, others by color or genre. The act of selecting which movie to watch regained weight when pulling actual objects rather than clicking thumbnails. These rituals slowed consumption, making entertainment feel deliberate again in an age of endless scrolling. Home transfers preserved personal histories. Families converted childhood recordings fearing tape decay. Grandparents' war stories, childhood Christmases, forgotten commercials. These mundane moments gained historical significance as analog artifacts. The imperfections, date stamps glitching, shaky camera work, authenticated their sincerity, absent from polished digital media. Collectors valued such tapes as highly as commercial releases. Technological hybridity emerged. Some digitized collections while keeping originals. Others pair VCRs with modern receivers for improved sound. A thriving modding community enhances vintage equipment with HDMI outputs. This blending of eras reflects how collectors reconcile nostalgia with contemporary conveniences, preserving the past without rejecting progress. The format's afterlife continues evolving. What began as discarded relics became cherished artifacts. Technological limitations turned into stylistic virtues. Commercial failures gained second lives as cult objects. Through this transformation, VHS outlasted its obsolescence by becoming something richer. Not just a way to watch movies, but a means of experiencing history tangibly. The collectors ensuring its survival aren't just preserving tapes, they're safeguarding a different relationship with media itself. Late-night online auctions still play out regularly. Bidding wars over rare editions, last-minute sniper bids, the thrill of winning a sought-after tape. Winners carefully package their new prizes for shipping, protecting decades-old cardboard corners. When those boxes arrive, the ritual repeats, inspecting the contents, testing playback quality, finding shelf space. The cycle continues, because each tape represents more than its contents. It's a physical connection to how we once experienced stories together, before streaming fractured viewing into isolated silos. That persistent appeal ensures VHS remains rewound, but never forgotten. That soft click when you pressed eject wasn't just mechanics. It was the sound of stories waiting patiently for next time. VHS taught us to share moments, not just watch them. The worn edges on favorite tapes showed how often they'd been handled, not just how many times they'd been played. Maybe tonight's the night to dig out that tape you saved. Listen for the familiar hum as it loads. Watch those first tracking lines flicker. In a world of fleeting pixels, those magnetic particles held something real.
Don't forget to be kind. Rewind. Sweet dreams, fellow time travelers.